Thanks to Thrive Market for sponsoring this video.
Hey guys, it's Amanda, and today we are talking about all things tacky. Yes, tacky, the term that describes wearing white after Labor Day, bad manners, unfortunate interior design choices, and everything in between. Tacky is not a word I often employ, but I started thinking about it because of Chappel Roan. If you don't know who she is, get more gay friends. She's a queer pop princess who has become an overnight sensation, if you count 10 years of work as overnight, but that's a conversation for a different day. In just 3 months, she went from 2 million to 20 million monthly Spotify listeners and has had 3 songs on the Billboard Hot 100. Sparkly synth pop, luscious vocals, and the almighty algorithms of Spotify and TikTok have undoubtedly skyrocketed Chappel Roan's career. But I think a significant part of her appeal is her aesthetic. She wears wigs that could swallow her whole and commits to a bit like her life depends on it. At Gov Ball, she performed dressed like the Statue of Liberty, her entire body meticulously painted metallic green. She emerged out of a big red apple for good measure. She attributes her penchant for over-the-top makeup, spidery lashes, porcelain white foundation, and rhinestones galore to drag queens. She wears fringe-lined leotards, assless chaps, and bedazzled butterfly wings. She sports lipstick-stained teeth and $50 prom dresses with pride. She looks unapologetically gaudy and welcomes artifice with open arms. These are the trappings of what we are told is tacky, too loud, flashy, and garish, but Chappel Roan does this on purpose, and it works.
It just also helped that the aesthetic of the Chappel project is tacky. I love looking pretty and scary and or pretty and tacky.
I love a tacky queen. It's silly, it's fun, it's pop music. Have a blast.
To her, looking interesting is much more important than looking beautiful. She lovingly describes the aesthetic of her stage persona as tacky, and it was partly born out of necessity. As an independent artist, she didn't have the money to hire glam squads and stylists, so she did all of it herself. On the cover art of her debut album, The Rise and Fall of a Midwest Princess, the makeup, hair, and styling is all courtesy of Chappel Roan. She doesn't describe her aesthetic as tacky in a self-deprecating way, but treats it as a bedazzled badge of honor. She isn't trying to change the meaning of tacky, she's embracing it, despite its negative connotation. To Chappel Roan, tacky isn't something to sneer, it's something to celebrate. Being tacky is to have fun and to be unapologetically yourself. She isn't the first nor only person to reclaim it. In 1991, Dolly Parton described her signature flamboyant look as sincerely tacky. She said, "I swear if I hadn't been a woman, I'd probably be a drag queen just so I could dress up like this." And while Dolly's look was met with pushback in the beginning of her career, it eventually became her calling card. Over the years, tacky has crept back into the limelight. In 2022, Time magazine published an article titled, "Welcome to the Era of Bad Taste." It points to micro miniskirts, trashy reality TV, and the pervasive sound of hyperpop as signs of a bad taste renaissance. Tacky is far from a slur. It's a word hissed by Bravo celebrities asserting their dominance over their leopard print-clad co-stars. But reclaiming tacky as a positive term isn't insignificant. As petty as it may seem, it's rooted in classism and prejudice. While it's relatively easy to point out tacky, it's harder to explain why. Who decides what constitutes bad taste? Spoiler alert, it's probably who you think it is. And while tacky is having its moment in the sun, I think it's interesting to examine who is able to successfully reclaim it. So that's what I want to explore in today's video, the past, present, and future of tacky. But before I get into that, I'd like to thank Thrive Market for sponsoring this video. Hello, and welcome to my little table of treats. Getting a food-related sponsorship is every YouTuber's dream, but it's specifically my dream because I live in New York, where grocery shopping should be classified as an Olympic sport. Thanks to Thrive Market, I will be retiring because they help me save time, money, and my arms from falling off. Thrive Market is an online membership-based grocery store on a mission to make healthy living easy and affordable for everyone. I live near a healthy grocery store, but inflation has made the prices so crazy, so I was very excited to go to Thrive Market's website and see brands and products that I know and love at a much better price point. Let's talk about it. I have a silly little beverage addiction, and Thrive Market has made it so much more sustainable. I'm currently fixated on Poppy. It's like the perfect medium between seltzer and soda. I ordered a bunch of them. I love the raspberry rose and Doc Pop flavors. I also decided to be a responsible adult and stock up on some pantry essentials like garbanzo beans, oats, and applesauce. Orders over $49 shipped free, and I feel like in this economy that is the minimum amount I'm spending at a grocery store anyway. So run, do not walk to Thrive Market. Actually, you literally don't have to do either of those things because it's online. So click the link in my description to get 30% off your first Thrive Market order and a free gift with my code AmandaMariana. They're currently having their 25% off summer sale right now. You do not want to miss it. It's so satisfying to see the amount of money that you're saving on everyday essentials that you would have bought anyway. So thanks again to Thrive Market for sponsoring this video, and let's get back into being tacky. Let's start with the history of tacky. Tacky originated in the South, and it was used to describe something exhibiting poor quality and taste. Linguists believe that it can be traced back to a horse, the Carolina marsh tacky, which is a small horse with little value due to how common it was in the South Carolina region. The word tacky became an adjective to describe things like this horse, low quality and lacking breeding. If you guessed that rich people invented tacky, you were right. It was used by a wealthier, educated class to describe those who were not sheltered by the branches of a family tree, who were tainted. Tacky became a term for a poor white inhabitant of the southern states, similar to the terms hillbilly and cracker. The adjective, enlarging on this sense of ill-bred, began to be written down in the 1860s and has been in use ever since. The word transcended its southern roots in part because of the term ticky-tacky, coined by Malvina Reynolds and popularized in her 1962 song Little Boxes. Unfortunately, I can't play it because I would love to make some AdSense off this video. The song is a social satire that describes the development of suburbia and associated conformist middle-class attitudes. It mocks suburban tract housing as little boxes of different colors, all made of ticky-tacky, which all look the same. Ticky-tacky is a reference to cheaper materials used to construct homes post-World War II. Reynolds was inspired to write the song while driving through Daly City, California, and seeing scores of copy and pasted cookie-cutter homes. Her critique, however, is less about the houses and more about who lives in them. In the second verse, she describes the people who inhabit these abodes as doctors, lawyers, and business executives who went to the same university and, despite their varying careers, were put into boxes that made them all turn out the same. The song points out the futility of Western individuality and the default to social conformity. We're not as unique as we think we are. I do find it interesting that tacky was first used to describe poor white Southerners, but in the song Little Boxes, tacky is associated with the unimaginative bourgeoisie nature of the suburbs. Being upwardly mobile can't save you from being linked to tacky, just like the age-old adage, money can't buy taste. This only grew more apparent by the 1980s with the rise of McMansions. Someone needs to remake Little Boxes, except call it Big Boxes, and sing about the horrors of McMansions. You cannot talk about tacky without mentioning McMansions, the structures that survivors of suburbia love to hate. The term McMansion was coined in the 1980s to describe poorly designed, expensive, and outsized homes built on small suburban lots. The name was derived from McDonald's because the homes were usually mass-produced, overscale, and constructed with cheap, homogeneous materials. McMansions are the ultimate tacky offenders, mostly due to their lack of architectural harmony, which Kate Wagner popularized roasting on her blog McMansion Hell. Some of the houses featured send chills goes down my spine. It's like they gave a 10-year-old access to build mode on The Sims, except it's real life. I think what makes some of these McMansions so unappealing is their fakeness. Fake balconies, fake shutters, fake columns. They're like the architectural equivalent of tiny pockets on women's jeans, aesthetically mediocre and functionally useless. They're trying to be something they're not and failing miserably. Lack of architectural integrity aside, I think people also love to hate these homes because of what they represent. New money. New money in the McMansions it purchases illustrates a lack of restraint comparable to a kid in a candy store. In a 2017 blog post for Strong Towns, Rachel Quednow wrote, "New money purchase encourages disdain, while old money purchase invites jealousy, if not begrudging admiration." While the McMansion may be a status symbol for one tribe, it's clear that for many Americans, the mockery of McMansions is a way we signal to one another that we have good architectural taste, a healthy awareness of our budgets, a concern for the environment, and so on. We turn up our noses at those who would decide to invest and live in such a house. This is such a great observation, and again, it shows that you don't necessarily need to be rich to weaponize taste. I think a good chunk of people who hate McMansions are millennials and Gen Zers who are fueled by spite and priced out of the housing market. When you see someone spending millions of dollars on a monstrosity, you can't help but think, I could do that better. Tacky as an insult can be leveled from both sides of the aisle. The middle class call the nouveau riche tacky, and rich people lob it at anyone poorer than them.
So, I hear you've made an enormous faux pas, and everyone's laughing up their sleeves about your date.
What? Why?
Why? Because she's brought a ludicrously capacious bag.
What?
Last year, the quiet luxury trend took over TikTok, and thousands romanticized the idea of old money. Sophia Richie-Grange and her $4 million wedding were the face of this trend. She was praised for her aesthetic transformation from garish Kardashian-adjacent trash to classy wealth whispers socialite. The most disconcerting aspect of old money aggrandizement is that it's not just about the aesthetic. It's moralized. There's a belief that old money families have ingrained values of responsibility and humility when it comes to wealth. Those values are contrasted with stereotypes about new money, which is often associated with conspicuous consumption, materialism, and a lack of social responsibility. Depictions in pop culture often reinforce these stereotypes. Characters from old money backgrounds are typically portrayed as refined, educated, and morally grounded, whereas new money characters may be depicted as ostentatious, ambitious, and morally questionable. The judgment on old money versus new money also has a racial undertone. In an article for Les Media, Raina Vale writes, "Old money evokes images of refined white elites in mansions with ivy-colored walls. In contrast, new money conjures images of celebrities, athletes, and self-made entrepreneurs, many of whom are people of color. These stereotypes subtly suggest that white individuals have a natural, inherent claim to wealth and prestige, while people of color are latecomers to prosperity, only achieving it through entertainment or sheer luck." I think the relationship between race and the term tacky is very interesting. Like I mentioned earlier, tacky was originally used to describe poor white Southerners. To me, it's always been a word that kind of gave white on white crime, if you will. So what about poor black people? I feel like the equivalent adjective for tacky is ghetto. This is not to say that black people can't be tacky or aren't tacky or don't use this term, but I feel like they just have very similar connotations, except one of them is more obviously racialized. Ghetto was originally used to describe isolated Jewish neighborhoods as early as the 16th century. In the late 1800s, it was resurrected to refer to Jewish immigrant neighborhoods in big cities like New York, notably Manhattan's Lower East Side. Young Jewish immigrant women were often called ghetto girls. They were dubbed tacky, outlandish, and even vulgar by white Americans who claimed their dresses were over the top and that they wore too many bows too much jewelry and too much makeup. In 1918, Marian Gold wrote an article in the American Jewish News titled "The Modern Ghetto Girl, Does She Lack Refinement?", in which she stated that the fashionable dress of the East Side girl shrieks its cheapness in a mimicry of the real thing. Her exaggerated coiffure with its imitation curls and soaped curves that stick out at the side of the head like fantastic gargoyles is offensive to the eye. Her plated gold jewelry with paste stones bought from the Grand Street peddlers on payday revels its cheapness by its very extravagance. Sound familiar? It is exactly how someone would describe a modern-day ghetto girl, except the key difference is that today, this evokes images of a black woman, not a Jewish one. In the early 1900s, African Americans started to use the term ghetto to describe their own residential segregation. All over the United States, cities passed zoning laws that prohibited black people from living on blocks where the majority of residents were white. In Levittown, America's first suburb, it was written into leases that the homes could only be occupied by members of the Caucasian race. Post-World War II, black people increasingly used ghetto to describe the residential areas they were restricted to. Daniel B. Schwartz writes, "The new black referent for ghetto truly came to the fore in the 1960s as urban race riots starting in the middle of the decade vaulted segregated areas onto the front pages of newspapers and onto television screens across the nation and the globe. Digital history resources reveal how usage of the word ghetto soared in the 1960s and 1970s, and how phrases like Negro ghetto or increasingly Black ghetto came to eclipse Jewish ghetto. In this day and age, ghetto is still primarily associated with blackness. As a noun, it refers to segregated, under-resourced neighborhoods, but in slang terms, ghetto can also act as an adjective. It is mostly negative and dehumanizing, but sometimes it's reclaimed as a positive with terms like ghetto fabulous, which refers to a lifestyle of showy but superficial glamour and luxury that is sometimes adopted by people in or from the urban ghetto. When I think of ghetto fabulous, I think of the viral hood prom trend on TikTok. The term hood prom has been used on TikTok to describe prom celebrations in the Black community characterized by extravagant styles, with attendees treating the occasion with the same level of importance as an event like the Met Gala. In this context, hood seems to be shorthand for ghetto fabulous. It describes a distinctive flamboyance. The extravagance and cultural importance of the events have been compared to bat mitzvahs, quinceañeras, and sweet 16s. However, the term hood prom is generated by the comment sections of these videos. It's not the attendees who are naming it as such. In some comments, the term is used lovingly, but by many, it's used as a dig to say, "You're doing too much. This is too loud, flashy, garish." But when I think about the extravagance of these hood proms, what comes to mind is camp, the highest, most unapologetic form of tackiness. In a 2018 Lit Hub piece, Joe Weldon writes, "To be campy is, among other things, to be tacky on purpose. Campy embraces the detestable with affection as an actual aesthetic." I feel like there is an element of camp at play with these hood proms. The outfits and entrances are over the top, and while prom seems like a frivolous occasion, they take it very seriously, a signature characteristic of camp. As Susan Sontag wrote in her seminal essay, Notes on Camp, which popularized and further defined the term, camp introduces a new standard, artifice as an ideal theatricality. If this doesn't describe hood proms, I don't know what does. Everything is exaggerated. I think we should be calling them camp proms. But there's a fraught relationship between blackness and the concept of camp. In an interview with Teen Vogue, fashion historian Darnell Lisby said, "One reason Black culture is not within the camp conversation is because the term itself has a lot of basis in theatrical, outlandish, exaggerated, and extreme fashion. Even though I believe there are so many examples of camp in Black culture, there is a broad paint stroke over the Black experience, which is perceived to be downtrodden instead of vibrant." I think this is exemplified by the term hood prom. Even though we're seeing all these fun, vibrant celebrations and outfits, the defining feature of all of it is still hood. This one little word manages to overshadow even the most outlandish extravagance. Black people don't get enough credit for camp. I think there's an implicit bias that white skin equals refinement, hence there's self-awareness involved in their over-the-topness, while black people are perceived as being over the top out of ignorance. In other words, just plain old tacky. Ultimately, that's the problem with the term hood prom. It undercuts the resources and creativity put into these events and attributes it to a lack of restraint rather than a concerted effort. But in the words of Dolly Parton, it costs a lot of money to look this cheap. To wrap this video up, here are some of my final thoughts on tacky. I think it's useful to sort of describe discernment about aesthetics, but it feels snarky when it's rooted in elitism. I think it's like the same thing as comedy. It just doesn't feel good when it's punching down, but it can be really great when it's punching up. I think that's why it's fun to like hate on McMansions, but it feels a little bit nasty to hate on people for prom outfits when they're doing their best. Ultimately, I do really like the reclaiming of tacky. Even though like tacky campy isn't my personal style, I think it's like really admirable when people do it and when they pull it off really well. And I think it's just like so much more fun than like basic boring ass like slip dresses. Like, yes, put on a mask, put on a costume, put on some wings, fly away. I love that. Anyway, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on tacky in the comments below. Can the concept of bad taste be separated from elitism or classism? Let me know all your thoughts below. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks again to Thrive Market for sponsoring. Don't forget to check that out. And I will see you guys in my next one. Bye.